Hello, I'm John Furrier here with theCUBE Pod. We are in Maui, Hawaii for the ACTAI Global. We're doing a series of podcasts with the leaders that are here, folks that are hanging out in the morning. There's great programs in the morning, then of course kite surfing in the afternoon when the wind kicks up. Mark Castleman's here, Managing Director at Intel. He was on a panel yesterday that I hosted with Bill Tye, talking about the power of energy and the power of AI and all the energy behind it, as well as other things. Mark, great to see you. We are on actually your balcony here, looking over the ocean here. Great.
Somehow I managed to get this balcony, and I'm grateful for it.
You got some pull there.
I don't know. I think I was late, and it was the last spot.
We're at the kids' table,
Yeah.
a couple places down. No, this is a great place. Hawaii's a great venue, good vibes. I mean, you have such great experience in the industry, and you see the diversity of talent here, right? Just a mixture of experts, pun intended, coming together from all different disciplines. This is a mix of male, female, I think 50% female, and just a great group of thinkers, doers, builders, entrepreneurs, investors. But it's not like an investor conference. It's just really kind of a community that shares for the betterment of the collective good.
Right.
In tech.
Yep.
So there's a real tech scene booming here in Maui. Not a bad place, short hop from California and the West Coast. So, folks watching, obviously COVID, a lot of people came here. What's your take on ACTAI and the community so far?
Yeah. Well, first of all, this is an incredible setting. and obviously Bill's legendary investor, founder, thinker, innovator. And so it's really special to have that type of person as kind of like a main energy source who attracts a lot of other folks who are like-minded. I think one of the things that's interesting, it's not an investor conference, but it is a place where people are investing in each other, with ideas, with their interest in what you're doing, like just their attention. If you have an idea and somebody can give you their attention, then you can work on that idea, and you can. This is a group of people who are very used to pushing the boundaries and hitting walls and oftentimes failing. Whether they're the athletes and they kind of crash, or whether they're the founders who also crash. And you got to come out of that and figure out how to solve the problems and improve and achieve what you're trying to achieve. And it's not easy, but it's worth it.
Yeah, and people are there for each other. Bill Tye was on there yesterday, and he's kind of reminiscing and kind of talking about some historical perspectives. You've seen many waves of innovation. You've participated in them. I remember talking to John Markoff, who used to write for the New York Times. He documented a lot of the history. He wrote a book called What the Dormouse Said, really kind of like the computer revolution in Stanford. Hacker culture was what he talks about, and how time sharing back in the day. You had groups of people. Bill talked about that yesterday about the underground, talked about the old Steve Wozniak story about the blue box. But this underground kind of like culture, now with social media, it's not so much underground. These are active communities, micro communities, some say. That kind of activist kind of vibe, and I mean that in a positive way, like there's like a real active kind of community, kind of hacker community vibe, where they realize that this technology revolution is here and there's benefits. And so that's a real opportunity. So you have this formation of these like minds who are going to work together, not so much to get paid. I mean, people in the long run, the long game gets paid. What's your take on where we are right now in some of the formation?
Well,
hold on.
Yeah.
Pause.
Oh, it. Oh, is it coming down?
Yeah, it was dropping a little bit.
Is that all right?
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Mark that spot. We'll edit that out.
All right. So, my experience, I work with or have been looking at literally thousands of companies every year, and primarily in deep tech. So when I started with Intel, I was looking at, I was running their deep tech accelerator. So I was looking at companies. I was trying to curate companies and bring them in and help them grow. And so look at a lot of founders and innovators. And so one of the things I've noticed, it was just about every founder I've ever encountered, they're working on a business or they're thinking about their next business. And so there's always something in the future that inspires them, and they're working towards that. And they almost never get stuck in the here and now. And I think that is something I tend to look for in people. Are they overwhelmed by the here and now, or are they really aspiring to something in the future? Even founders that are working on a current deal are thinking about their next deal,
Yeah.
and it's sort of like, it's like going to bed thinking about coffee in the morning. And it's inspiring because there's always something interesting to think about.
Yeah.
And certainly with AI and the possibilities of AI, and like you said, the power, the infrastructure, the connectivity, the benefit, the massive cultural changes that are already occurring, and how it's really rotating, the way we think about stuff and just changing the shape of things. When that happens, opportunities emerge.
Yeah.
And I call it sort of like new gravity. Everything is up in the air right now. Everything is up in the air. So that means that when it comes down, that opportunity is going to occur where it comes down. So the question is, where is it going to go?
Yeah.
And people are placing their bets, and they have their ideas, and they have their capital, and they have all this other stuff. So that to me is super exciting. It happens probably once every generation. We see one of these things. And I am a huge wave theory guy. Like, things happen in waves.
Yeah.
And we are absolutely, no pun intended, like in a major wave situation. And it's a convergence of waves, and it's happening everywhere, not just in the US or Silicon Valley or wherever. It is literally occurring everywhere.
I love the waves thing too. I'm totally in the same wave hype as you on the terms of using it as a metaphor, because if you look at the confluence of the AI infrastructure at the semi-level, obviously Intel and others, there's major architectural changes. It's up in the air. The role of storage, compute, networking's changed.
Right.
I was talking with folks around the database, another ingredient it used to be one database rules the world. And if you look at the old Intel days, we always talk about this on the CUBE pod, the 286 processor, the 386, and then every innovation of new system processor in those times, there was more advances in the software. So you saw that kind of Moore's law kicking in hard. We're seeing kind of that happen while the agent layer, the app layer, is coming in. Some say it's going to be 100x bigger than SaaS, which was SaaS was, okay, I build some stuff on my computer, I host it in the cloud, I get traction, I put it in the app store, boom, Dropbox is born.
Right.
Or Airbnb. Agents are kind of enterprise by default, because you can't just build an agent, throw it in an agent store. There's no agent store yet. Maybe that's coming.
Well, maybe there is no agent store ever. Think about it like this. If I have the ability to create within seconds the thing that I can imagine, then there is no store. I simply imagine the thing that I want. I have a dialogue with some GPT, and it creates it, and creates that functionality, creates that workflow, creates that capability. So, in the old days when we had applications, we had a product manager who was trying to imagine the best use case to cover the most number of people. Yeah. But in an agentic world, it is the individual literally directing that outcome. So if everybody can create their own Dropbox, what is Dropbox? Okay. Yeah. And it's interesting to think about that. Now, if I can do that times hundreds or thousands of iterations for myself, and you're doing the same, and everyone else is doing the same, the shift from this so-called app economy to agentic or conversational AI or conversation economy is real. And the question is, will the economics shift along with the capabilities shift? And I think that question of how to monetize the agentics is going to be a huge question. What does each one cost? How does it function? Where does it go? What power does it consume? How many tokens does it take? What APIs does it consume? Where does the data go? Blah, blah. This is like endless, okay? And so solving that problem is going to be a very, very big deal.
Talk about the agent dynamic, 'cause I totally love that kind of narrative of, we don't yet know, but it is personal. It's personalization, hyper-personalization. That word's been overused, but it is hyper-personal if it's runtime. Or an agent that's working on my behalf.
Yeah.
It changes the whole workforce conversation. Totally. I heard people were debating, do I call it AI, is it labor? Is it a workforce? Because you could have a worker, a digital worker, but they only do half the job.
Right.
Or maybe 3/4 of the job, or maybe the whole job. So is it a worker if it's only working half the time? Because the human in the loop. So there's a big debate upon, digital work, digital labor. Now, labor sounds like a balance sheet, hey, the labor costs are. So I kind of don't like the labor word. But what's your take on labor, digital worker, digital workforce? Are they all? Is it just semantics? Because people kind of are debating this kind of weird semantic role of, what do you call it?
Yeah, what do you call it? I think it's a good question. There are other things to add to that. So, for example, typically we think of labor as some contribution of effort that defines the value of the output. So we tend to think more effort you put in something, the more valuable the output is. That's one way of thinking of it. Or we tend to think of just scoring the output against other output, and then that gives us some kind of economics. So it's really hard to know, is this labor? Is it work? Is it benefit? Is it altruistic? And generally that is a function of what is the cost. And so if I hire you to do a job, then I know the cost of that. If I have an agent do a job, it's actually really hard to calculate the cost. And so we tend to need to look only at the output in that scenario, and then work backwards and understand the cost so we can know the margin. This is very complex, actually, if you're doing this times, let's say, billions of agents and trillions of agents. And so I'm not sure if that answers your question, but everything is a workflow.
Well, I mean, it's a provocative question because this is the question of our generation. What is and we always hear the cliches. It's outcome focused. Be outcome focused.
Yeah.
Of course. Yeah. Outcome.
Yeah, sure.
But productivity is the key driver. What's happening with the results we're seeing immediately today is productivity.
Yep.
That's actually can be quantified. Hey, I'm more productive generally, but I can't micro spec out the cost.
Right.
So it's a good question. I think this is going to be the question for all CFOs. Brian Bauman and I did a CFO summit around AI. People are like, why are you doing a CFO summit? I was like, well, CFOs are instrumenting the business model.
Exactly.
And so there's a business model transformation, not so much a digital transformation.
Well,
we're going through the digital transformation now.
For sure. Well, one of the things I think it's great that you guys are looking at the CFOs, because the AI outcome discussion is purely financial. Okay, so if you look at the old model of SaaS, typically what happens is an enterprise adopts a SaaS platform, and then the cost of that is basically a service tax across the entire organization. So IT takes that cost, spreads it out across 10 groups, and says you pay 7%, you pay 10%, you have 50 people, you have 100 people, etc. But for an enterprise AI use case, this is not how it works. Every use case is its own ROI analysis. And so a single use case doesn't transfer to the next use case. Yeah. So everything needs a financial calculation. Yeah. What is the outcome that I'm getting for the cost that I'm expending? And this is actually very difficult. And so a lot of enterprise AI right now is suffering from not being able to determine what is the cost for the outcome that I'm getting. So if you're, I won't use a financial services firm, but if you're a financial services
firm. If you're JP Morgan, you got $17 billion technology budget. You can do whatever you want.
Well, let's imagine you have, let's say, fraud detection, whether it's deep fake or whatever, and you're maybe, I'll guess, maybe you're losing $60, $50, $80 million a year in fraud. And so you want to implement a project to reduce fraud by 10%, $6 million, okay? So the question is, what does it cost to reduce your fraud by 10% or $6 million? And obviously, if the cost is $8 million to reduce $6 million, it's not a good project. So believe it or not, it's very difficult to figure out what is the cost to reduce my fraud by $6 million. And so the CFO is sitting there going to the team, hey, I get it. We want to reduce fraud. What does it cost to save $6 million?
How much do you need?
How much do you need? Yeah. And in a typical MPV calculation for a project, you kind of understand what you're building, and then you have this outcome. Yeah. Well, in an AI use case, this is actually super difficult to calculate. So about 90% of the enterprise use cases are not happening past POC because they're hitting this barrier of understanding what is the cost to deliver this outcome. And I have been looking at hundreds of these things over the past year and a half and talked to many, many enterprise organizations who are also trying to implement this for customers. And I think when this gets solved, you will see a massive adoption of enterprise AI use cases once the cost side of the equation is understood.
Mark, you bring up a great point, and there's a famous meme going around. We've all seen the Steve Jobs videos and ad nauseum. We've seen them all, but there was one in particular, and he's like, I don't understand. We hired all this management, and they didn't know the cost of anything. And I asked them, how much does it cost to build a Mac?
Right.
And they're like, well, Steve, this is how it works. We do like as you said, peanut butter. I call it the peanut butter spread.
Right.
Well, and his point was in the video, just to summarize, was they actually didn't know the cost of everything, so they had models to figure it out, and they were kind of trying to get order of magnitude closeness to it. And he's like, we just built a factory, and they were the early ones in robotics. If people know the Apple history in the 80s, did that, and Intel did that too. So they've got modern manufacturing. Okay, so that was called the unit cost of how to build a machine, bill of materials, whatever. Now, to your point about being up in the air, it's almost the same. So the
Yes.
CFO has these mechanisms,
Right.
or the teams have these mechanisms for what the cost is to do things.
Yes.
Generally.
Generally, you're right.
Not
so what happens
specifically.
is, yes, so they say, well, it will might cost this, okay? So there's a number, and then there's a probability of that number, and then there's a variance off of that number.
Yeah.
So what happens is sorry about that. The combination of all three of these things, you get risk, okay? And if the risk is too high, they don't do it.
Yeah.
This is why it's a financial calculation. Just like if you were to invest in a stock and you have a certain risk or return, you do or do not do that based upon this risk profile. And so if you have, let's say, a guess of a project cost, $10 million, you have a probability of success, and then you have a variance of potential outcomes. And part of that outcome takes you negative. What do you do? And right now what's happening is they do nothing.
Yeah.
They stop.
They don't know what to do.
They don't know what to do, so they do nothing because you have this ambiguity. And I think as an industry, and from our perspective, we can drive out ambiguity. We can increase the probability, success probability, and decrease the variance of that particular trajectory. Then you can get a yes, and the companies will implement those projects. And for us, that means more compute, which is great.
It's everything's up in the air. I love that everything up in the air, the gravity story, because I think when it comes down to reality, they'll be grounded into the business model.
Right.
The other factor to throw in is that CapEx and OpEx.
Yes.
So now I was talking to a CFO we were interviewing, and he's like, I want to learn about AI because I'm approving these GPU orders
Yes.
and these clouds.
Right.
And the systems, which are going to be generationally architected
Yep.
for 5 to 10 years, there's either discounted cash flows,
Right.
there's all kinds of calculations,
Yep.
and they're literally throwing darts at the board,
Totally.
and they're like, what the fuck is going on with this? And so
Totally.
and they're under a microscope because they're the ones responsible for instrumenting all this. So
Yep.
they say, okay, what's it worth if we're going to drop, say, 300 million on that Neo Cloud or this
Yeah.
CapEx or our new Amazon pre-purchase, whatever they're doing, right?
Yep.
Well, we hope that the agents. Well, what's the agents mean? Like,
Yeah. What are the
we'll have a better work
economics?
environment. People will be happier. They'll come to the office. We'll get
Yeah.
real estate.
Yes.
We're paying for, so we're going to use the real estate. So what are you optimizing for? So the question comes to, what should people optimize for in today's era? Because of the change up and down the stack.
Yes. So I look at it as two sides of an equation. Okay. So let's say your CapEx side, and this goes for cloud as well. What am I going to spend? I'm going to spend stuff. So oftentimes it's very easy to go do something.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go buy some GPUs. Let's go buy equipment. Let's buy networking. Let's buy connectivity and power. Let's go buy. That is a guaranteed outcome. I can always control my spending, in the sense that I go spend.
Yeah.
Boom. It's my decision. What I cannot control is on the inbound side. So the inbound side is way more complicated because someone else has the control, and they have to decide, are they going to give you their money for the thing that you're doing? That's a capture equation. So you have two sides. You have a create value side and you have a capture value side. And create value, I create compute, I create infrastructure, I create the capacity to do things. The capture value is someone wants me to do those things and they give me money in exchange for that. Really hard, okay?
Yeah.
So I like to tell folks that this is 100% about customer value, and are you delivering the customer the value that they're trying to achieve? And if you are, they will give you money.
Yeah.
And if you're not, they're not going to give you their money. And so in that sense, it's kind of simple, but it's actually really hard in practice.
Let's talk about the capture side. The capture side, because I think
Yeah.
the value side is pretty clear. We kind of see,
Yeah.
we can certainly spend an hour just on the create value side, but the capture side is two theaters we're seeing. The mega hyperscalers.
Yep.
They're getting all the cash capex on the hardware side. They have higher level services. They have pay by the drink kind
Right.
of model. So
Yep.
they're already in business. Most of the AI action is in the hyperscalers. The enterprise side is a huge opportunity. The unlock
Yes.
there, we're seeing stats anywhere between 70 and 90% of the data on-prem
Yep.
is not being utilized. And
I
that's
believe that.
proprietary
Yes.
intellectual property if you look at data as IP or an asset or a value opportunity. So the capture side on the enterprise side, the customers of the
Yeah.
so-called entrepreneurs and companies that want to sell their value to them, they kind of are trying to figure out what to do.
Right.
So what's your perspective on that? Because there's a lot of POCs. I think we've
Yes.
been saying there's POC purgatory or
Right.
POC stall, sprawl.
Yes.
And it's not as easy as testing a ABC vendor
Exactly.
and XYZ
Yep.
stack, because you have now thousands of POC vendors potentially collapsing into maybe one or two stacks on-prem.
Yes.
Either legacy, modern legacy, we've been saying. So now I'm the customer. I want to have my outcome.
Yep.
And I want to capture the value, but what the hell's going on? It's kind of like there's a lot of action going on, but like it's like
Yes.
getting stuck at the airport and there's no TSA pre. Like I just want the good stuff to come through.
Yeah, yeah. And how do you know good from bad? And look, you're nailing it, because this is really the hardest part of the capture side, which is I know I have a problem. Okay, I have, let's say, a fraud problem.
Yeah.
I have a customer churn problem. I have a waste optimization. I have a throughput problem. Whatever the problem is. Problem identification is part one. What is my problem?
Yep.
Okay. And then I have to figure out what steps am I going to take to solve that problem. And then I have to figure out what do those steps cost me? And so that is all going to figure into whether I do CapEx, OpEx, et cetera. So again, it goes back to cost and understanding that. The customer is never going to give you their money until you can answer that full, complete equation for them. And so the entrepreneurs who recognize that it is not just create and the customer will come and understand what you've created for them.
Yeah.
You actually have to complete the entire equation and say, this is what happens when you implement this. This is what will happen for you and with you and to you and on your behalf, et cetera, et cetera. In other words, the entrepreneur or the business or whomever is selling has to know their customer better than their customer. Because if you create, if I create a giant stack of compute, thinking that my customer is going to look at that and go, I know exactly what to do with that stack of compute, then I'm probably not going to be successful.
Yeah. Andy Grove, famous Intel executive, had an expression we always quote on theCUBE: let chaos reign and reign in the chaos. And there's also another sign that AI, and something's hot, when you see a lot of shadow activity.
Yep.
Shadow IT has been coined.
Right.
Like Wi-Fi, when Wi-Fi came out, if you remember, it was not accepted.
Right.
You know, you had VLANs, everyone had lockdown networking, you had shadow Wi-Fi, right? So you always have these shadow kind of movements. There's a lot of shadow AI going on.
Totally.
And now you have the enterprise saying, wait a minute, we can't let the shadow AI happen because people can see value. I can engage a vendor. Hey, I'm capturing value. I can solve my little sales problem by hiring this startup, and they come in, they make sense of the data, glean. Oh my God, its search is great. I'm more productive. And then they come inside the enterprise, and then next thing you know, there's a chief AI officer.
Right.
Whoa, hold on, right? So there's a pattern going on where you got shadow AI going on because there's capture opportunities.
Yep.
But they're not organized.
Right.
And so I want to get your thoughts on this, because the role of the chief AI officer is highly debated, because we've been saying, what's that role? Now, I talked to John Rose, who's the CTO at Dell. He's now the chief AI officer. He's not like a political position. He's like a technologist.
Yep.
His job is to actually rein in and just make standards. And he told me the demand for AI projects from them to offer some value was high. So
I believe it.
He had a long list. Every department had at least 3 or 4 projects.
I believe it, yeah.
So now he said, we just streamlined the hell out of it. I picked 3 use cases, and we went all in on those to get wins.
Okay.
And that's kind of like the top down.
Yep.
But then you got the bottom up shadow piece.
Yeah.
What's your take on this? Because it's not it's a feature, not a bug, but at the same time, when you talk about enterprise AI, end-to-end workflows start to matter, scale matters. This is going to probably be a front and center issue in 2026. What's your thoughts on reaction to that?
I tend to look at, I think it's an entrepreneurial problem. So if you have part of your organization going off and using, let's say, unapproved tools and systems and what have you to solve a specific problem, I think you should pay very close attention to that. Because as an entrepreneur, if I'm starting a company and what happens is people solve the problems that they're able to solve on their own. So generally, if your customer or your market opportunity is solving the problem on their own, usually with like Excel or something like that, right? Excel is the land of all kinds of solutions. If your customer is solving the problem for themselves in some kind of kludge, bubble gum, and duct tape, you have a product opportunity. And if you're the chief AI officer, you're really serving and enabling the people who are producing for you. If you opinion, this is Mark's opinion.
Okay,
if
good.
you see your teams using tools to solve problems that are relevant to them, I think you lean into that. I think you embrace it and accelerate those micro solutions. And I think that the tendency is to want to sort of turn that into like a system.
Yeah.
And again, this is Mark's opinion. I think that back off from that, solve those individual problems for each person and empower that particular problem to be solved, and then work your way up the stack.
Yeah.
And you start doing that across the whole organization. What happens is that everybody gets their problem solved, and the organization changes.
We heard Katie Potter on a podcast earlier talking about getting people part of the journey.
Yes.
It's like, first hit's free, as they said, the drug dealer always says. Get people excited by it, right? I mean,
Right.
that's, it's like, why not, right? Like,
imagine your IT organization coming to you and saying, "Hey, we noticed that you adopted this little tool to solve this problem, and we think that's great." Now, that is an unusual thing coming out of many, sort of IT services organization. But when they do, it's actually kind of cool because you're validated that you're solving a problem. Other people recognize you're trying to solve a problem for your organization, and I want to get my work done.
Yeah, this is a huge thing. We talk about, again, on all our podcasts, because Dave and I debate this all the time, because if you go too top down, you have the risk of paving over the cow paths.
For sure.
Versus reconstructing, which was going on now. If you look at all the top enterprises, they're literally re-architecting their data centers.
Yep.
Because the on-prem data they want to keep there. They got the cloud distributed computing, hybrid cloud going on. So it's like, okay, I have some stuff, but I'm not going to just pave over the old stuff. I can abstract away and rebuild. All those systems look like one thing.
Sure.
The data center as a computer, not necessarily like, I got a rack, I'm going to put some gear on it, connect it to the other rack. I mean, even though it's technically happening, but most of the mindset on the change management is, what are these system clusters serving?
Right.
And the demand for tokens is driving massive system re-architecting.
Well, yeah, imagine if I'm solving a problem in an enterprise using an agentic AI studio to build solutions. Is that shadow IT? What am I doing?
Not if you get an outcome that people have been striving for. Say that lab incubator solves the fraud detection problem.
Yeah,
Then it's like, okay, magic.
It's like yes, I'm always shocked when people get the outcomes that they're looking for and get upset at the procedure that got them there. Yeah. And I was like, who cares? You got within boundaries, obviously. Yeah. I mean, but you want to get this outcome. People are empowered to do it. What a great organization that is able to do that at scale. I think that is probably the sort of AI organization of the future, where folks are solving their problems with the tools that are available to them. And again, back to the sort of agentic AI. Yeah. If I can create my own Dropbox, I'm not trying to be unfair to Dropbox, but if I can create my own...
It's basically a file sharing system.
It's file sharing. If I can create my own restaurant recommendation, if I can create my own restaurant reservation system, if I can create my own travel agent, if I can create my own sort of ticket buyer, whatever, and then I have agents talking to other agents and sort of working on my behalf, and I get my job done, great. Yeah. Great for the organization. Now we have like data protection, and we have fine tuning, and we have sort of PII, and we have all these other things. But it turns out there are agents that are great at examining that stuff and creating those little boundaries to create the checks and balances.
I mean, I'm a huge believer in vertical solutions. Like the old tech expression, remember in the entrepreneurial circles and VC circles was, "Oh, that's a feature, not a company." That's a phrase. There's a pony in there somewhere.
Right. Yeah.
Those cliches are out there. But now with AI, you could literally come in on a narrow seam in a market, nail a feature, and scale that up, and take a category position. Yeah, and then sequence to a broader position. You don't need to boil the ocean over.
Exactly. Well, the best use cases that I've seen are very specific, super specific, and that goes back to the cost equation. So the more specific you are with your not only your outcome but your implementation, the clearer path to understanding cost, because you have fewer variables, and your likelihood of success goes way up. And so this is counterintuitive, because a lot of, whether you're a product manager, project manager, entrepreneur, or whatever, we tend to think, well, if I put more stuff in there, it becomes more valuable. And in fact, the opposite is true. So the more you take out, what you're doing is you're leaving opportunity for success for the thing that you're actually trying to identify. And that is hard, because our brains tend to think more is better. Like a buffet is better than a single thing.
Yeah.
But not true.
Yeah, it's more complex if you throw more stuff at it.
Exactly. And complexity introduces variability, and variability introduces risk and cost and all these other things. And then what you get? No decision.
Yeah.
So I think for whether you're a project manager, individual contributor, entrepreneur, the more focused you get on a specific thing and do that insanely well and self-identify as the best in the world at that, that attracts attention. It's just like whether you're a kite surfer or an entrepreneur or an investor, like I do this and this is what I do. And now people can value you.
Yeah.
And I think that that's really actually pretty intriguing.
We could do a whole segment on valuation.
Oh, man.
What does valuation mean? I mean, at many levels, there's multiple threads to pull there.
Totally.
What's the value of the startup? I mean, I just saw Loud Ventures, Pete Sonsini's new firm with the Databricks founder, did a $100 million seed round.
Right.
Like, okay, come on. Guys, that's not a seed round. It's a price seed round. I guess it's a Series A. You're like, what is that? Like a $100 million seed round. So, okay, valuation is not really a factor. I mean,
look, we could talk for years about valuation, for sure.
And then internally, well, Mark, we could do another hour. Thanks for coming on. Big scene here.
Yeah, beautiful.
The vibe is strong. I have to ask you, what are you excited about now? I mean, obviously, you have the trajectory. You're in a great position in your current job. You've seen the waves. You've ridden the waves. You've experienced them. You're now a participant in the arena. Now, what are you most excited about right now? I mean, personally and professionally.
Well, I think I love to solve problems. I love big ideas, and Intel is one of the greatest tech companies in the history of tech, and the opportunities that this company has are really like this is a 100-year market, and I looked at that and said, I want to be here because if I can be a part of this company really growing into that 100-year opportunity, that is a lifetime of transformation. And rarely do you get that kind of opportunity. And I think for the folks that, whether you're talking about our new CEO or you're talking about the leaders that are there, everybody recognizes that. Yeah. And it's creating a lot of focus. And, where things have changed a lot. And that, for me personally, is very exciting. Now, then the marketplace, I mean, it's the largest market in 100 years. Yeah. So why wouldn't I want to be a part of that?
Everyone's coming out of retirement now. It's like Sergey Brin spending 5 days in the office. He's like, he's a billionaire. Where'd you work?
Exactly. This is the time to be alive. And it's a little, anytime you have a market where it's kind of equally opportunist or there's the sort of upside opportunity and kind of scary, these are the best. Yeah. And it's where I find value identification is when you can identify something that is insanely great and equally a little bit scary. That delta is your identifier. That is a huge opportunity. It's a culture-changing opportunity. It will absolutely change everything. Yeah. Dive into that.
All right. Mark, thanks for coming on the pod here on your deck in beautiful Maui. It's the CUBE Pod specialty with NYSE Wired. Brian Bauman's in the house. The whole team's here. Thanks for watching.